It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. We're back again. Back for the podcast. Say hello and introduce yourselves, podcasters.
Hello, I'm Els Tahura.
Hi, I'm Chad Jetner.
Hello, I'm Peter Lawrence.
And I'm Kyle Bacher. And today we're going to talk about hyped up stuff, hyping things up, hyped up platforms.
And are they
technology.
overhyped?
Are they overhyped? Is just hype in and of itself overhyped? Like, do you ever need to hype anything up?
You have to hype everything
that's
up.
really a thing. Something comes out, people get excited, and then the excitement wanes.
That's right. You have to motivate people, I guess. So what, yeah, all right. I guess so much going on. My brain is scattered to the four winds. My office looks like a Best Buy. I walked in here and threw up. So anyway, hype. We were so good at this yesterday.
All right, let's start with self-driving cars.
Okay.
Are self-driving cars overhyped, underhyped? Are they the future? Are they coming? Are they going? Are they ever going to happen?
I saw a post about somebody probing into the self-driving car claims over at Tesla. And I don't know what that was about. But I know that I've heard about self-driving cars for a long time and how they're coming and all of the stuff.
I think our self-driving cars are self-driving cars, the flying cars of the future. i.e., we'll talk about them. We'll have sci-fi movies about them. And here I am, 50 years later, still wanting one.
Yes,
Isn't
and
it kind
no.
of? Yeah, I was gonna say like the lane assist stuff, right? That's not in a self-driving car, but I think we're nudging in that direction, right? Like when you're steering wheel, like what is I don't drive brand new fancy cars ever, but like what is the lane assist technology? Like when you leave your lane or when you drift, like it kind of helps correct you, or automatic braking. Like what is that if not an early version of self-driving cars? So we get excited about the idea of getting in my garage and pouring myself a cup of coffee in the driver's seat of my car and just like reading the paper on the way to work, which is probably going to happen at some point. But we don't really celebrate the little successes that get us from where we are today to what that is going to eventually end up being, right?
Which
what's
I
the
think
expectation on that?
Yeah. And that's where I think when we're talking about hype and whether something is overhyped, I think that's a really good example, because do I think at Chad, just like you did, like someday, yeah, we're going to get to that point, but Peter says no. But the overhype is where we say, we're going to do it and it's going to happen. Like that's going to be the next step. Like that's absolutely what's coming next year or even
18 months from right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Where you have something that's useful, something that's exciting and new that is being pitched as a universal problem solver.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a big one. There's so many things that self-driving cars could do, especially for infrastructure like trucking and all that kind of stuff. But like going step by step toward that, and like Chad was saying, like celebrating those steps. Like, hey, now if a deer runs out in front of my car's going to stop. I don't have to stop my car. It knows, hey, there's something there. The brakes come on. Lane assist keeps you from running off the road if you fall asleep. Or maybe it can detect you're asleep and wake you the heck up with loud music or something. Or it can wake you up with brake assist.
It'll shake the steering wheel because now cars are driven by wire instead of by mechanically connected steering wheels, which I mean, all these things are cool. And don't get me wrong, I do think we're going to creep up and get close, but I think we'll never ever get to the full get in, cup of coffee, newspaper, take a nap. Well, first of all, by the time we have self-driving cars, newspapers will be even more of a thing of the past than they are now. But
Hard disagree.
To the lament of bird
We
and
always-
hamster owners everywhere.
I was gonna say we always need paper mache supplies.
Just think of like all of the little things that continuously get a tiny bit better to get us to the self-driving world, right? Like even
Mhm.
us up here in Minnesota, the adaptive, what do they call it? Where the wheels that slip and then it transfers power to the wheels that grip. It's a commercial, but it's still, I mean, my truck does that. My truck is old.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
these
Yeah,
little,
traction
these little-
control,
Yeah.
slip differential.
the advanced traction control stuff, the GPS built into everything, like all of that stuff is leading towards this. Am I ever going to be able to, like my parents live, there's a 4-mile dirt road between the highway that they're off of and their house. And then there's this little tiny path that isn't really a road even that goes to their house. Like, is self-driving cars going to get me from my house to their house ever? No. I mean, I don't think that's ever going to be a thing. But gosh darn, we're going to get really, really close. And that's something to be excited about.
I'm totally excited about it. But the hype, which is what, kind of our topic is, like a certain Elon person has been talking about a self-driving car for years, and that it's just around the corner, and it's amazing, and it's going to be awesome, and it's going to be super. But do I think he could have sold it if it was, and cruise control is going to be better? No, I don't think he could have.
Do you buy a Tesla because of the self-driving promise, or do you buy it because it's an electric car and there's all the other benefits that come along with that? I don't really, like, I rented one in California once. I would never consider the self-driving capabilities part of the sales pitch because it was horrible. Like there's a little thing on the dash, right, that shows you the traffic around you, which is that car's view of your environment.
What it thinks is there.
What it thinks is there. And holy crap, like it thought the car next to me was spinning in a circle at one point, like on its middle axis.
And you didn't even notice?
And I was like, I looked at the dash, I looked over at me, I looked at the dash, and I'm like, what on earth could possibly be tricking this into thinking that is an accurate representation of reality?
So the Tesla right now will like pull out of a parking spot and drive up to the curb and pick you up.
Yep.
Yeah, some of them
So
do
that's
that.
self-driving, right? That counts.
Well, and
It's a
then
piece.
the Ford Focus, like a decade ago or 12 years ago, would parallel park itself.
Right.
Right? Like all of that is self-driving cars, but we didn't, I mean,
We did it.
yeah, like, okay. I think it's one thing. Hype in and of itself is just weird, right? Because at this point, everybody knows that Elon Musk is essentially kind of a snake oil salesman to a degree. Like, when it comes to like the self-driving stuff is right around the corner. Okay, yeah, great, sure it is.
It's a really long corner.
The Cybertruck has bulletproof or shatterproof windows, and then like just watch, I'll throw a rock through it. Oh shoot, I just threw a rock through my truck's window in a demo, right? Like we all kind of, I hope, recognize the hype man, and we can separate the hype man from his pitch from the reality of what's happening. And if you can't, then oops.
Yeah, like the utility of hype. Like you may not get to the original goal that's being sold, but it's understanding that developing hype is a way of getting interest, getting people to invest money in you. And I would imagine that at least if you're have a decent head on your shoulders, there is a part of you that understands that, hey, we may not reach that goal, but it's worth shooting for that goal so that hopefully we can make useful and interesting incremental progress along the way. Like I think about I think a good example of we did it was like, we're going to go to the moon. Like, cool, great. We actually did make that goal. But when you think about how the lasting impacts of that work might actually have had a bigger benefit to our society than just the simple we went to the moon. Like that was a way to sell it, but in the meantime we get things like shock absorbers and rechargeable hearing aids and the emergency space blankets. Like,
Right.
that's awesome. Like for me, that kind of thing can retroactively make the hype worth it, because look at all these cool things we got out of it, because it was fun to have a stretch goal.
Well, and
Yeah.
it was only, it's only hype if it doesn't meet its expectations, right? Like if it falls short of the claims that were made about it.
Well, but I think that's what we're talking about, is that almost everything today is sold with a little bit of stretch. There's a little bit of wiggle room in there from reality and what they're promising, right? Like, oh, the reality is it's not quite as good as that, but it's good.
So waiting for something to be perfect before you move forward.
Yeah.
And
Horrible.
like, okay, we can't because we're not going to move the ball forward. We're going to be working on this thing forever. And I think so. If you don't move forward and you tell people, well, we're waiting for it's perfect, or if you move forward and say, well, it's imperfect, are people going to like hop on board?
So
It's
it can't
like,
be an
well, I
all or
don't want to
nothing.
go with something that's got problems.
Right.
Well, it's like, well, I guess we're not going to do software development then.
Ever. No software was released in anyone's lifetime because it had bugs.
Or
Right.
that your goal's always going to stay the same. Like that's the whole idea with running agile, is like, okay, maybe you have a longer term goal, but you're chunking it out into increments so that if you do need to tweak things, you can. That doesn't make the individual increments bad in any way. That means you are making progress. It just isn't a single dramatic reveal. Like either we did it or we didn't.
Right. Well, and I was thinking like in software development terms, just from the teams that I've been on, there's been a lot of hype around what we were going to produce and where we ended up getting to by the time or money or caring, a lot of those things change over time, right? And eventually it's like, all right, we're good enough. Let's go live. We're live and we'll improve it as we go. Right. But our goal, that wasn't our goal when we started. I mean,
Yeah.
MVP was the goal, but we really wanted the final product.
So
Chad,
if you look
confused.
at, oh, sorry. Were you gonna say
The
something?
idea of not producing perfect software is just foreign to me, Peter. Please tell me more.
Oh, I can't wait for the retro after your project is done. And
I know.
And here's where we started.
Oh,
I think what about hype when the hype is something immeasurable? Like, this is going to do this for you. So I know one of the selling points of SharePoint was how much more findable your stuff was going to be, and how much more accurate, because you're all working with the latest current version of something. So you're not looking at the old sales, the old price sheet,
Right.
and selling things at $1 less than the cost to manufacture them, and losing millions of dollars. But the claims like we waste half our time looking for stuff. And so if you get this tool, then you're going to have twice as much time. And well, by the time you start using it, like that's all forgotten,
Right.
and How do you measure that?
I don't think you can.
Right.
I think.
I don't
I
think
mean,
anybody
and that,
wants to. Like,
well, and nobody would have brought. I mean, for good or bad, nobody would have brought SharePoint on board without having the hype of or the promise, right? Like, oh, it's probably going to save you 5 minutes a year. Oh, okay, great. We'll spend some time on that. Or it's going to say, it's going to triple your sales. Well, what if it doesn't? But you got to have the hype.
The other thing is the like ease of use of something. Like you're going to get all this out of this platform or this tool. And anybody can use it. And then no, they can't.
Not anybody I know.
Yeah. I think that because then it's like, well, that's putting the burden back on the user. It's like, well, anybody can use it. You're just not, if you don't think it's intuitive, maybe you're not intuiting hard enough. You didn't get the right training. You didn't read the manual.
what are some other technologies that have been like overhyped, Peter?
Connected home, speech to speech translation.
Connected home is another one of those that was like, I mean, going back to the Jetsons, right? The super connected home of everything. Put your house above the weather, put your, all the cool features that anybody would want. I'm happy when my lady in a tube can turn on the lights and doesn't think I've said off, but thinks I said on. Some of these things that I needed to be better trained by the tube to make the tube do the things that I wanted. But connected house, it gets closer every day, just like self-driving cars, right?
It's almost like the hype it's all about, it's taking a problem that you currently have and it will solve it, and it will not introduce any new problems.
No new problems.
My ice maker doesn't work when my fridge is not connected to Wi-Fi. Like,
Yeah.
that's not a problem we had beforehand.
Yeah, someone can hack into my car when I'm doing 70 down the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate the what did you call it, Peter? The connected tube.
Lady in a tube.
Lady in a tube.
I'm gonna tell her to be quiet for a second. I love Alexa because I've constantly told my wife sometimes that she doesn't enunciate well enough, right? Like, honey, can you repeat yourself? I can't understand you, right? And it's usually been put back on, well, you're just not listening, right?
You're just deaf.
Yeah. She cannot tell Alexa to turn on or off a light without having to repeat herself 3 times. I'm like, see, even she agrees. I only have to do it once. You have to do it 3 times. This is a you thing, not a me thing. Me and AI are on the same page. So
Chad spent 20 hours training himself how to speak with the correct enunciation for this particular lady in a tube.
Yes.
And it works perfectly in his arguments.
Alexa, buy 50 pounds of dog food. Send now. Ship.
Nope.
Did she?
Nope. I've trained her not to respect your voice, Chad. She's just like, nope.
I'm glad you put in your voice in that sentence. I've trained her not to respect. That would be great.
I mean, that's the other thing, right? Like a connected house, the house of the future. You'd walk in as a homeowner, you'd be able to do all the things. You'd be able to make it not work for your kids at certain times of day and not work for that. And lo and behold, that's a lot of work. So many of us don't do it, myself
Do you think
included.
that we're used to so much hype that we're getting immune to it to an extent, which creates the need to add more hype? And so now we're just having to hype everything to get people to do anything.
I think yes, of course, because it almost
honestly,
has to.
I mean, QVC is still wildly successful, so I don't know that we're not immune to hype.
We're not there yet.
I don't know, man. Like, I think the fact that QVC and all of these infomercials and all of that stuff is a thing.
That's hilarious that you mentioned that. Because I know a certain relative of mine, who I won't name on the podcast, has some granite stone cookware now.
Nice.
Would never, ever in a million years have bought any cookware in any store, but purchased it over the phone.
Uh,
Why do you
Something
need to buy 50 different knives at the same time?
Need.
Yeah. That
Need
was
is
they
funny.
had the knife show, and these guys would sell all sorts of knives and batches of knives and things like that. And it's so like just the hype of that, like there's no lie there. It's like these are like 50 knives that you're buying, and maybe the quality, but you don't need them. Like you're getting people to do something they don't even really need to do. Is that hype, or is that just
I think that's
snake
just
oil?
marketing.
We'll call that one marketing.
Well, one of the biggest hyped events that we used to pay attention to, or at least I did, and people like me did, was the Apple's big
Telephone?
presentation that they would do once or twice a year, right? The
Yep.
big new iPhone announcement. It was a big production and packing, and it was like a rock show for nerds, and
You couldn't miss it.
you couldn't miss it, right? Well, now you can, because it's kind of like after a decade of like being hyper focused on this one thing, it just kind of waned, and people are like, oh yeah, there's a new phone out, and it's going to be incrementally better than the previous one, and we don't need to watch the show anymore. We're
Right.
just going to assume you're going to get a nicer camera and more screen, and now a new color, I guess, is what's left to be innovative on. Hey, it
More
comes in
memory.
purple now. Well, great.
More
Well, back
storage.
when they were doing that, the leaps were greater. Like the things that they were demoing were fresh and new and awesome. And like the
Some of them were.
iPod, like when that came around, it's like, what do you mean?
But it was
can
always
1,000 songs.
like,
But we don't
what
have
was
that anymore.
4 or 5 years ago, they were demoing augmented reality, like with the iPhone as part of that big event. And I was
Yeah.
like, and my struggle with some of that stuff is like, okay, then what? Right? Like augmented reality for what? Like what
Yeah.
what practical use do I
application?
have? I mean, it's cool that I can point my phone at a kitchen table and I could watch some little baby dance around on it. However,
Training on really, really expensive things that not everybody can just get to do training on, like virtual training on like big devices. I think that's one useful thing I heard of. I'm like, yeah, if you can train on how to use a big like CT scanner thing, or whatever, this multi-million-dollar, you're not going to be able to supply enough of those to train the people that need to use them on necessarily.
So are we talking about Google Glass and things like that?
Google Glass, maybe the Oculus.
It's a bit of hype around that.
Yeah. I mean, Google Glass like came and went kind of fast, right? Like that was like one season, basically, like an actual, like I said, it happened in the spring and then it was done in the spring, wasn't it? Or am I thinking that maybe I'm accelerating the demise a little bit, but it didn't seem like it was, and people were creeped out by it. Like people thought it was just creepy, not cool. I mean, it was cool, but it was also, I didn't get one, but it did seem insanely creepy.
So was it overhyped because it didn't actually work in the application that they were pitching it? Was it that they weren't considering other factors, and that like what Why
I
was
think
that
it-
overhyped? Because I would say that would be because it was just, it's going to change the world. Everybody's going to use it. And then the bubble popped and nope.
Never mind.
Yeah. I kind of forget what happened around, but like that was kind of around the time when the big Apple conference, the Apple event was a huge thing, and then Google got in on it. And they had their little thing, and they would announce a product, and people would go nuts. And it just kind of like fed in on itself. And I think now people are just like with all of these little tech things, just like, okay, sure.
I think
I'll be able to watch Game of Thrones on some other thing, I guess.
Well, and I think like with Google Glass, some of the implications I don't think were completely thought out because it's hard to fully test that in the real world, right? Like, well, if I'm walking around and I walk into kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, all these different areas, is Google Glass going to be smart enough to not record, or what are we doing here? And I don't think they thought it all through. And I don't think they wanted to. I think they wanted to throw it out there and see what happened. And there was a lot of hype at first. And it was going to be cool.
I think having like a heads-up display in your day-to-day life where you're walking around and it's telling you the price of things and giving you information about landmarks and all that other stuff. It's like, it's distracting. When do you want that? Is it the information you're really looking for?
Is it only beneficial for advertisers?
Yeah.
Right. What's the use case for that, right? And
Hype.
and that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't want to know the prices of everything all the time, right? Or don't want to know what bird is singing right at this moment because it's on a song on the radio and I don't really care, or something like that, right? Like I want the computer to be smarter and know when to give me the information that I want when I want it. And I think we're a ways off from that.
I think that kind of ties into, at least for me, the idea of artificial intelligence and machine learning and data science can be overhyped, because that there's this expectation that it's just going to solve all problems. It will show us where we can make more money. It will be more helpful to customers. And similar to like the Google Glass thing, Peter, that you're saying, like, there are genuinely transformative applications of that, but
Absolutely.
you need to define the context in which those things are going to happen, and then you need to be really set up to support that. So like, can you afford Google Glass? What networking options does Google Glass need to pick? Like, how do you troubleshoot it? Where do you go to swap out the frames? Like, just there's contextual, like, environmental things that need to be set up either, in your life owning Google Glass, or at a company saying we want to do artificial intelligence. Like, okay, you can get all the hype you want, but you do kind of have to put the rubber to the road and support that in order to help kind of realize the hype into reality.
Yeah, AI is another one of those that has been super hyped for a super long time.
Yeah.
And I think we're finally getting, I don't know if we're getting the processing power in the cloud that makes it more capable, or if we're finally getting, enough people have been working on the problem for enough years that we're finally getting the results of good, strong AI. But I mean, I remember learning about AI in college, and that was more than a year or two ago. So it's been a while. And, the hope was always, it's going to just do things and be amazing. And I think we're finally getting to the reality where it's going to do things and be amazing if you tell it the right things and give it the right parameters and give it the right data. And then it'll do amazing things for you.
Yep.
Yeah, the idea was that you would get AI to a point where AI would get itself to a point
right
where it was AI. And I mean, if you
Which
look
is
at like
a simple sentence, but
yeah, if you look at like it's always AI versus a human, self-driving car versus a human driving a car, and kind of the hype around that is that it's going to get to that point, and then what is that point going to do for you when it does? Like self-driving cars, like is it good enough when it gets to a point where it's safer? Like instead of having 100 deaths, you're going to have 50. Well, it's like humans are not perfect drivers, which is pretty obvious if you drive at all. Wow, cars can finally merge. That's amazing. But, so it's like, again, going to perfection. Well, we're going to go with self-driving cars when they're perfect. We had 2 accidents this year. Okay, back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Or we'll go to self-driving cars when we can guarantee that all the cars on the road will be self-driving, because that might be simpler than how on earth do you manage to do a self-driving car when that car is interacting with other self-driving cars and other humans. A lot more variables.
Yeah, the cars can talk to each other or not, right? And I think that's the point. And we'll get there. I think just like AI, we will get there. It just will be a lot longer path than the hype.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get there, like if you want to live up to the hype, you have to hype things up to get people going on it, to get people started. Like the first cell phones, sucked. It was this huge brick, and you had to be like in the right area, and there was not enough towers, but it was this revolutionary thing.
I mean, the first phones sucked.
Yeah. And now I think they're pretty good.
Yeah, and I think adoption makes that change pretty obvious also, right? Like cell phones became a lot more capable once the network was everywhere. And telephones became a lot more capable once everybody had a telephone. Like being the only person in the world with a telephone, while cool, very useless because you cannot call anybody. So
yeah, I think the idea that hype is beneficial to get momentum is really useful, because I think that also, can apply to cloud as well. Okay, if it's just, hey, cloud's just better than on premises, full stop. Like, okay, that is overhyped, because then you start to have people say, well, if I just do a lift and shift from on-prem to cloud, it's automatically better because it's cloud. Like, not necessarily.
Right.
But when you start to get enough people, you start to get more effort into, okay, what does it look like to do cloud native architecture? How does that actually save us money, save us time? What are all these additional extensions that we can use so that we can interweave more systems, more third-party tools, more bits and pieces, and really take advantage of something that earns its hype more and more over time, I would argue.
Yeah, I mean, cloud, you make a great point that cloud was, I mean, how big was cloud 10, 15 years ago? And now even.
It's weird that I saw on a lot of these lists, when I was kind of doing a cursory glance through what people think currently overhyped things are, AWS shows up on almost all of them. And if anything, I think it's almost the opposite these days. Like, maybe it's a little hyped up, but like it's super useful. And I don't know that anybody outside of the guy that created hey.com, he just wrote a big long cloud article about how he's going out of the cloud and back to on-prem. But like outside of that dude, I don't know that anybody or any company that wouldn't go there first.
So I wonder if that's also kind of getting at how there are a lot of things that would be hard to say are universally overhyped or underhyped or appropriately hyped. Like I wouldn't be surprised if people who maybe aren't in IT or aren't directly interfacing with technical teams might view AWS as overhyped because, well, I use my browser. I use spreadsheet technologies. I have like everything is, a web app. I don't care if it's like where the servers are.
Yeah, it does seem weird to me that AWS advertises during like football, NFL games, right? They're like, hey, this catch was, and they have the little guy, they have the players and they overlay the graphics that says, there's a 0.5% possibility of this catch, and then he catches it. And I'm like, well, you just kind of told us that you didn't expect that to happen, and then it happened. Like, what is happening right now? Who's your market that you're trying to
fantasy football? It's IT people that play fantasy football.
But I think that's a great example, Chad, like, because that I can absolutely believe someone watching that going, well, that's useless.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know where I was going with that comment, but it does seem like that the hype
that the turning point for that hype has happened, right? Like AWS, other cloud services used to be more hype than they were service, and now they're more service than they are hype.
Yeah, like maybe 10 years ago, folks would have been saying, yeah, the cloud is the future. And now we're in the future and we're like, yeah, those guys were right. Like it literally, it absolutely is.
Yep.
I think hype is essential because Peter used the word adoption. And I'm like, well, some things require adoption to work.
Right.
And
solar panels
require adoption to actually improve and innovate and get to a point where they live up to the hype. But if you never get people on board to make that journey, because then you don't see reality. Well, how are things actually happening? How are people actually going to use this? And what features are really taking off? Like with Microsoft throws a lot of stuff at the wall and sees what sticks and then moves forward with it. And so if you look at some of the things that have come and gone within like Office 365, it's like, yeah, they were trying a new thing and no one used it. They just couldn't get people on board. And maybe if they had, that would have turned into something awesome. But it just like, you need it to be good enough to at least get enough people on board. It's like a movie, if that opening night is horrible and bad reviews and all that stuff comes out, then people just don't go.
So, Kyle, I would say to kind of take your experience, there are a lot of people who might say that SharePoint is overhyped.
It's
when you're going into like, here's some work to do some SharePoint. How do you, like, are there things that you do to help counteract that or to start to get that adoption going?
All right. Stuff, for the most part, stuff just has to work. And so if there's functional issues, if you lose something, if it creates some kind of loss. So there was a point where sessions would time out and you'd lose an hour's worth of work on a page because you didn't save the page. And that was enough to drive a lot of people away. The platform is so broad. It's like, yeah, if you're touting every part of it, then you are overhyping it because there's just some things that are not that great or that there's way better tools for. I love Teams for online video calls and meetings and stuff like that. And the ad hoc collaboration, it's really easy for people to kind of spin up. but they're not really using the channels and the chat. There's a lot of it that's not getting used.
Mm.
That was part of the hype. So it's like it's working. But if I'm gonna do like text-based, like chat and groups and kind of a business social type thing,
Yeah.
like that Teams chat wall, if you need to scroll up or find it's just not, the design of it's just not as efficient as other tools. So I think you have to go into it and use the best parts of it. But if something just doesn't work, does that mean the whole thing doesn't work?
Mm.
And do you like junk the whole thing? Like, yeah, it does. It doesn't just drive me everywhere and let me take naps and stuff like that, but it keeps me alive because I'm a trucker and I drive like 12 hours a day or more, and there's a good chance I'm going to fall asleep. So it keeps me in my lane.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane.
Yeah. I mean, I like that because I think that's like, we've been saying like hype is useful, but I think also kind of getting more into specifics of like, okay, hype that doesn't have any kind of backing or backbone to it. Yeah, that's not going to be worthwhile. That something that lives up to the hype not only just works, but has an application for me or for you, or that there is a value to it that overall can be broad, but is there a small chunk that applies to different people? So maybe not here's a single overarching transformation that will equally impact everybody, but here's an umbrella of excitement with little tendrils that it might be more applicable. So thank you.
That makes
Kyle.
sense.
Yeah.
All right. What about the metaverse?
Oh,
Ah,
I don't want to go
Why-
in
why-
there.
Here's the thing. The Second Life was cool when Second Life was a thing for about an hour, right? You got to walk around, you got to talk to people. That was kind of neat. VR is really, really cool.
yes.
The first, when you first get into it. I don't know what the metaverse, like, I don't understand. I truly do not understand how
I think it's
$1
trying
billion
to-
company
Yeah.
celebrated when they added legs to the avatars in the metaverse. Like, there was no budget.
That wasn't the problem.
I know, like, nobody was like, I want to see Zuck's legs, man. I mean, show me them freaking bony knees. I don't think that was on anybody's radar. And then it's so awkward, and it's so disheartening to think that, okay, that guy had kind of one idea and it was a success, and now what? The meta, I don't get it. I
Well,
truly don't get, like,
I think
they've done it
there's
so many times.
there's like a vacuum that
Mhm.
you try to fill with something, and right now it's presence. It's being present with people when you're not in the same geographic location. It's like we can hang out even though you're across the country, and it's like, well, is having avatars, like, is that being with somebody if they don't look like the person? If they look
What are we
like
doing literally right now.
Yeah, like
We're all-
we've already got it. Like it's something that we've been told it will be transformative, but no one can actually explain how, because so far the only initial justifications are things that we either have already existed and failed, or already exist, making this redundant. It's like, here's a dream, but not a reason for the dream. And no
I
one
feel
else wants to join in on the dream. Like the fact that there were memos that even the dev team weren't spending time in the metaverse. Like even the people making it are not using it.
I feel like it's waiting for some kind of catalyzing thing.
Yeah.
That's gonna happen.
That's a lot of money to wait for a
yet.
catalyst. Yeah.
But it's like if they don't keep working toward it, then they'll never find it and hit it. And it's like, well, so does that mean we're all just gonna keep like investing in this thing until that happens?
Well, that's the thing. Nobody's nobody asked for this. It's and nobody really asked for Facebook anyway, but we got it. But like nobody asked for the metaverse. And actually, if I'm gonna be in something like that, I don't want to just be like, oh, here's a guy, he looks kind of like you do in real life. I'm gonna do what I do in Call of Duty, right? Like I'm gonna dress up as a, well, I'm not gonna go there, but the outfit, the avatar that I use in these things doesn't need to look like me. It doesn't help me. And Call of Duty Warzone, I play this with other STG folks, and it's a blast. And it's kind of a metaverse with guns and explosions.
So as a stepping stone, having that immersive thing in video games might have been a better first step than having that immersive thing trying to take what Facebook is and move it into some imaginary plane. Which
like trying to make real life, like day to day, just, hanging out and going about your day, making that virtual.
Like to Chad's point, we have Second Life. We have The Sims. We've had The Sims for 25 years.
We have The Sims. We have Overwatch. We have all these video games that are basically doing that same thing, maybe without the VR headset, but even that exists, right? Games with a VR headset, multiplayer thing like that. That's a thing that exists in the world. I don't what is the idea? You're going to jump into the metaverse, get in your metaverse car, drive to Target and interact with crap you might buy. But you can also just go to Target and interact with the crap you're going to buy. This is where I sound kind of like a.
So this is one of those where the hype we don't feel has quite hit any tipping point, and we don't even see the tipping point anywhere.
Correct.
We're not even sure what's being hyped. Like, what's
the problem?
What are they what is the metaverse?
We've heard of it, all of us.
Like, it's the metaverse is us. It's like, well, what is it doing? Like, what are we doing with it? What are we gonna do with it? I don't know. I don't understand what's happening in the metaverse and why I should go there and strap that thing to my head to do it.
All right. I feel like we've picked on the hype of some things that just miss.
But it's a thing where remember we were talking about driving cars, and there's baby steps where all of the baby steps have been beneficial, right? Mm-hmm. Even the iPhone stuff that we talked about, those used to be huge things, and we all cared because we all carried one in our pocket, and we could see the benefits of better cameras, better FaceTime being a thing now, and all the other all of the accoutrement that comes with that, right?
Yep.
We could AWS cloud computing, right? It was hype, and then it became a thing that we just rely on. Mm-hmm. And even back when it was hype, we could kind of walk down that road. I can't do that with the metaverse at all. I just can't go from it's dumb right now, but it's going to be it's always going to be dumb. Right? It's always going to be a stupid thing.
Spoken like a true old man yelling from his porch right there.
I'll yell at every single metaverse cloud that exists. Or I don't know, maybe they don't exist. Maybe clouds are in version 2.0. I mean, they just put legs on. Why would they have a sky?
Yeah, I don't know enough.
What problem? What problem is it solving? That's
the fact that Facebook is not making enough money. That's the problem that they're trying to solve.
Yep.
They're just maybe not succeeding at it. How about blockchain? What about blockchain? Blockchain got enough hype? Any success?
NFTs.
I think blockchain is still potentially going to be a useful thing, right? And it's not a it's not a metaverse and it's not a whatever. It's like cloud, right? There's going to be utility there
Right.
that the ledger is going to help, facilitate. And
It won't
the
do
fact that-
everything.
yeah, the fact that we only
That's the important
associate
part.
it with comically like stupid things like Dogecoin and whatever is kind of a bummer.
I was
but-
running around Dogecoin. Didn't want to impact you, Chad, because I know
Oh,
we've talked about your fantasy rise of Dogecoin, and I don't know where it's at in reality, if it's come back or not.
oh, buddy. We are actually, it's coming way back. It's
Coming
been,
way back. Time to get in.
Oh yeah, jump all in again.
Are you
Elon-
using
no, ever
Hype
since-
right now?
Ever since Elon took over Twitter, it's been up. I think it's up like 30% this week.
Wow.
way back when he took over Twitter.
We,
Oh no,
But no, I-
that was
yesterday.
yesterday. Yeah.
Chad, what you're saying, I think that's a really good point to call out too. It's just that blockchain, I would argue, there was a period of time when absolutely it was overhyped because it was being sold as this is what everyone will use for every type of transaction and every ledger, every voting system, every No, it
Your-
won't. There
your
is a
Apple
useful
will-
application to it, but it is going to be a smaller sliver of the pie.
Right.
And
If
so
it-
that's kind of part of the Gartner curve. Like it's going to go down into the like trough of unhappiness as everyone craps on it because they were sold a perfect solution. But then it comes back and reaches a plateau where it's like, cool, it is useful. It's just not useful for everything.
Yeah, and I think like part of the problem with blockchain specifically, and maybe this is a part of a metaverse problem too, is that it is directly tied and associated to something that is easy to root against, right?
Yes.
Like crypto
yeah.
bros are goofy, right? Zuck is a goofball, and it's kind of like cathartic or whatever to like root against them being successful, right? And if your technology or your idea is tied to somebody that you kind of want to see take a couple of hits, great, right? That's your hype machine is going to work against you. But I think with blockchain specifically, it's going to come out on the other end as kind of a cool concept that literally it does have so many practical uses in the world
Right.
that it will bounce back from the negative connotations that birthed the whole thing.
Parting thoughts?
Hype is
go
not
ahead.
always bad, but hype's not always bad. I'll just say that.
I don't think it's always bad. I think hype is
He was just so eloquent, and now
Yeah, I ruined it.
I know. I was literally I was there.
Sorry.
we'll come
I
back
think
to
if you-
Chad. Nope,
Yeah,
you got
come
it.
back to me. You go, Peter. You go.
I don't know that anything gets off the ground without hype. So it's a necessary thing. It doesn't always work. Sometimes the hype is just the hype rather than excitement about a product. And hopefully, we can have as few of those as possible.
My
Kyle.
parting thought is use hype for good, not evil.
Mm.
Hmm.
All right,
Chad,
Chad.
has it come to you?
I think reflect on it once in a while, right? Like, and realize that sometimes it's nonsense, and sometimes you got to pay attention to the hype man, but also like once in a while it validates itself. I don't know. That was
So it's
a
like
whole lot of nothing.
caveat emptor, right? Buyer beware.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's a little bit of it that's just give hype some time.
Yes.
Sometimes it's self-fulfilling. Sometimes it's not, but you need to give it some breathing room.
Yeah, it might not live up to the hype for you, but it might live up to the hype for somebody else.
Yeah.
Excellent. Peter? do you have another parting thought?
I was going to say being on the trailing edge of hype is a pretty good place to be. It doesn't hurt as bad. It's not as, painful if all the things are figured out.
Awesome. All right. With that, I think we'll say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.